Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Israel.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. We begin with troubling new allegations against the CIA. The agency's internal watchdog reportedly asked the Justice Department to investigate whether some of its agents may have spied on high-level lawmakers. The head of the CIA denies the claims, but it's picking up steam on Capitol Hill. Our Caitlin Burke reports.
For 4 years, staffers for the Senate Intelligence Committee investigated a top-secret CIA program aimed at pushing terror suspects to the breaking point. Now lawmakers say the CIA was monitoring that investigation, violating the constitutional principle of separation of powers. CIA agents reportedly searched the computers of committee staff members, trying to learn how they gained access to the CIA's own 2009 review of their interrogation program. Now, many senators are crying foul. In a letter to President Obama, Senator Mark Udall said, quote, "The CIA has recently taken unprecedented action against the committee." And Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Carl Levin said that if true, it's, quote, "an extremely serious matter that could violate federal law." Even former members of the spy agency are troubled by the reports.
It sounds like an aggressive CIA trying to protect something, within our own government. These counterintelligence investigations are meant for foreign governments or even press leaks, but not directed against the Senate.
But the CIA is pushing back. Some officials have implied that it's actually the committee staffers that acted out of line, penetrating part of the CIA's computer network that they weren't authorized to access. CIA Director John Brennan said, quote, "I am deeply dismayed some members of the Senate have decided to make spurious allegations about CIA actions that are wholly unsupported by the facts." Brennan went on to say he's confident authorities will determine where wrongdoing, if any, actually took place. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
New revelations about the ability of spy agencies to monitor ordinary people online. Not only can they read your emails, some of them have also been capturing images from web cameras. The British surveillance agency known as GCHQ intercepted and saved the web images from millions of internet users, including people who weren't suspected of doing anything wrong. The London Guardian reports the spy agency randomly collected still images from people using Yahoo's webcam chats. In 6 months during 2008, the program gathered images from nearly 2 million Yahoo accounts around the world, and many of them were sexually explicit. Yahoo told The Guardian it didn't know anything about the program.
Turning now to the crisis in Ukraine, where diplomacy is off to a very slow start. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's talks with Ukrainian and Russian leaders went nowhere Wednesday. But Kerry says he remains hopeful there will be a face-to-face meeting between Russia and Ukrainian diplomats. Here in the U.S., Congress is rushing to impose stiff sanctions on Russia, whose troops have seized control of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. Meanwhile, Crimea's parliament voted to join with Russia and the Moscow-backed government, and it will hold a referendum on the issue in 10 days.
I think we have to stay with Ukraine, not separating, not go to Russia.
Now, Russia did see a show of support in eastern Ukraine, where thousands of demonstrators stormed past riot police to take over a government building.
The Israeli Navy intercepted an Iranian weapons shipment on its way to terror groups in the Gaza Strip Wednesday. The shipment contained dozens of long-range rockets. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Israeli defense officials said they tracked the shipment for months.
Over the last months, the Israeli intelligence has continued to gather extensively in order to intercept this mission that Iran was trying to carry out.
The shipment included dozens of M302 missiles with a range of between 60 and 120 miles. Those strategic weapons would have put millions of Israelis and cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem within rocket range and represented a new level of danger to Israel's home front. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the weapon shipment reveals the true face of Iran.
Iran is smiling, talking soft in the international forums, but it continues unabatedly its aggressive behavior in the Middle East and beyond. It's sending the deadliest weapons to the most cruel terrorist groups and despots like the Assad regime. It has not changed one iota its aggressive policies. I think it's critically important to prevent this terrorist regime from having the weapons of mass death. This regime must not be allowed to have nuclear weapons capability.
The seizure lifts the veil on the ongoing daily covert war between Israel and its enemies, what Israel's Chief of Staff Benny Gantz calls the war between wars. The IDF released a video tracing the route of the missiles from Syria to Iran, onto a civilian ship at an Iranian port, and then into the Red Sea, where Israeli naval forces intercepted it hundreds of miles away from Israel. Some analysts call the seizure the biggest arms shipment in more than a decade. The ship is under tow now and expected to arrive into the Israeli port of Eilat over the weekend. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Back here at home, President Obama is campaigning for a higher minimum wage. He spoke at Central Connecticut State University Wednesday, surrounded by New England governors who have raised wages. Obama says they're, quote, Justice League of Governors. He wants Congress to raise the minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour. Democrats hope his message will help them win votes in November's midterm elections. Republicans point out the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates Obama's proposal would kill roughly 500,000 jobs. That's because businesses will have to lay off employees to cover the higher cost of paying their remaining employees.
The Obama administration has announced another major delay in Obamacare. The White House will let insurers keep offering health care plans that don't meet the law's requirements through 2016. That will prevent another wave of policy cancellations this fall, weeks before the congressional elections. The move will help Democrats avoid more bad news over Obamacare. Right now, polls show Democrats could lose control of the Senate.
The woman at the center of the IRS Tea Party scandal refused to testify at a congressional hearing Wednesday. Lois Lerner invoked her Fifth Amendment right before the House Oversight Committee. Chairman Darrell Issa repeatedly asked her about her involvement in the scandal.
In February of 2014, President Obama stated that there was not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS targeting. Ms. Lerner, do you believe that there is not a smidgen of corruption in the IRS targeting of conservatives?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Republicans on the committee are considering whether to hold Lerner in contempt of Congress. Her attorney tried to prevent Wednesday's appearance because he says she and her family have received numerous death threats over the case.
And the American Center for Law and Justice says Lerner's refusal to testify is a tactic aimed at preventing Congress from getting to the bottom of the targeting scandal. The ACLJ represents 41 organizations in a federal lawsuit against the IRS. And although Lerner won't answer questions before Congress, the group says other lawsuits may force her to open up.
In our civil case, as that moves forward, people like Lois Lerner, who can take the Fifth, and that means that her testimony, she didn't have to testify, so she couldn't be used against incriminating herself in a criminal trial. In a civil trial, so as we move forward to get to those stages, if she still refuses to testify, that can be actually taken as an inference against her. The Fifth Amendment only protects you from criminal, not civil. So there are ways that we can get to the bottom of this.
The ACLJ says Lerner's decision not to testify reflects the lack of cooperation between investigators and the Obama administration.
President Obama has come under fire for some of his nominees to represent America as ambassadors around the world. A union for Foreign Service Workers is meeting to discuss its concerns about those nominees. As Jennifer Wishon reports, they're worried sending unqualified ambassadors overseas will hurt America's economy and security.
It's been more than 20 years since the American Foreign Service Association weighed in publicly on a president's pick for an ambassadorship. The group serves as the union for America's foreign service workers. And after watching the recent confirmation hearings of President Obama's nominees, members couldn't stay silent.
The ambassador speaks for the U.S. government and the American people and the president.
Soap opera producer Colleen Bell nominated as ambassador to Hungary, hotel tycoon George Souness nominated as ambassador to Norway, and political consultant Noah Mamet nominated as ambassador to Argentina. All earned their chances after bundling big money for the Obama campaign. But after watching their performances during their confirmation hearings on Capitol Hill, members of the association felt they had to speak up to keep Americans from getting ripped off.
Mr. Mehmet, have you been to Argentina?
Senator, I haven't had the opportunity yet.
There are a lot of markets that will continue to open up.
Let me just ask, as ambassador, how would you promote those trade cooperations?
Thank you for that save, Senator Johnson.
There were several moments when the nominees appeared to need saving, but critics argue the stakes at America's diplomatic post are too high for failure. Just look at the crisis in Ukraine.
37% of ambassadors appointed by President Obama have been political. But career diplomats say problems with political appointees didn't start with the Obama administration. And they say there are examples of America missing opportunities abroad because her top diplomat in the post wasn't qualified.
Other countries do not send campaign donors to the United States as ambassadors.
Federal law says campaign donations shouldn't be a factor in the selection of an ambassador. In an effort to encourage the selection of more qualified nominees, the association has spelled out a list of guidelines.
They're common sense. It's requiring leadership experience, understanding of the host country, the country to which you're being assigned.
It's the president's prerogative to nominate ambassadors and the Senate's prerogative to confirm them. But America's diplomatic community hopes these latest gaffes encourage whoever is in the White House to be more selective in these important choices in the future. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Members of Congress are speaking out for persecuted Christians. 2 Republicans gave Ash Wednesday speeches condemning widespread attacks against Christians in the Middle East. Alabama Congressman Bradley Byrne said the U.S. should condition aid to countries like Egypt and Iraq on their treatment of religious minorities. Frank Wolf of Virginia asked American Christians to show more support for suffering believers.
Muslim tribesmen are suspected in the murder of 16 Christians in northern Nigeria Wednesday. Authorities suspect members of the Fulani tribe attacked several Christian villages in Plateau State. The Fulani are 99% Muslim. Morning Star News reports the group burned through villages, shooting randomly and destroying about 200 homes. One man from Guan village said they killed his wife, 4 children, and mother. He said, quote, "They shot sporadically and set my house ablaze, killing all members of my family, and the entire village has been destroyed."
Coming up, keeping a closer eye on your health. We've got important news about what foods are best and how you can prevent disease. 2 more abortion clinics are closing in Texas. Both clinics failed to comply with a new anti-abortion law that passed last summer. The new law requires doctors performing abortions to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital. The number of abortion clinics in Texas has dropped by more than half since the state began passing new restrictions on abortion in 2011.
A diet heavy on meat and cheese could be very bad for your health if you're middle-aged. It could be as bad as smoking cigarettes. According to a study from the University of Southern California, middle-aged people who got most of their protein from animal sources like meat and dairy were 4 times as likely to die from cancer. But protein from plants didn't have the same effect.
They're only talking about animal protein in the form of meat and cheese. In fact, the study showed that no matter what their age, people who ate high-protein diets in the form of plant-based proteins like beans and nuts did not have an increase in cancer risk.
Researchers say diet can have a different effect at different stages of life. People over the age of 65, a high-protein diet turned out to be good. Older folks who ate a higher protein diet were actually less likely to die from cancer.
Well, too much sugar literally could be deadly. The biggest study yet says it doesn't take all that much extra sugar to substantially raise the risk to your heart. Much of that sugar is hidden in many processed foods, and most Americans eat more than the safest amount. Just drinking 2 12-ounce cans of soda substantially raises the risk of heart problems for people who normally eat 2,000 calories a day. And the link between sugar and heart problems doesn't apply just to the overweight. It was also found in people who register at normal weights. The safest amount of sugar to eat is less than 10% of your daily calories. That would be under 200 a day for people who eat 2,000 calories.
Well, if you're over 60, you better get off your duff if you want to stay healthy as you get older, because too much sitting can seriously increase your chances of a disability, even if you're also exercising. That's a finding from a new study at Northwestern University. The researchers say for every hour those older people sit, they raise their chance of getting a disability by nearly 50%. USA Today points out research has linked too much sitting to increased risk of heart failure and type 2 diabetes, and death from cancer, heart disease, and stroke.
Up next, you've heard that a house divided against itself cannot stand, why some are now saying our nation needs to split apart to stay together. It's a concept most people associate with the Civil War, states seceding from the Union. But now a new secession movement is gaining steam.
Many conservative rural Americans are talking about creating their own states because of frustration over a federal government that's too big and a government that's too out of control. David Brody brings us the story.
The United States of America, comprised of 50 states. But wait a minute, what if the map looked like this? A 51st state called Jefferson, made up of Northern California and Southern Oregon. Or how about a new state called Western Maryland or North Colorado? These are real movements gaining traction with voters.
We're at this point of irreconcilable differences.
Jeffrey Hare runs the 51st State Initiative in Colorado, an effort to fight an out-of-control legislature trying to ram big government policies down the throats of voters. It's the talk of town hall meetings.
I have seen changes happen, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years in this state, that concern me.
It's predominantly left versus right, but it's urban versus rural because you typically found more traditional conservative values in rural America.
And that's the crux of the issue. Rural Americans across many states feel they're just not being heard. Their laundry list is long, and at the top, gun control laws.
They are out of touch with rural Colorado. There is an attack on rural Colorado, and it's not just with the gun control laws, it's on several of the other bills that they passed.
Indeed it is. The government mandates cover renewable energy, environmental policies that restrict oil and gas drilling, and controversial social issues like gay marriage. Organizers want to create North Colorado, and that idea went to voters in 11 counties this past fall.
I don't think that that's necessarily the way to make something happen within the area that you live. You're supposed to work within our electoral services.
The so-called secession movement here in Colorado had mixed results this past November. Some counties approved it, others didn't. But the organizers of the 51st State Initiative say, hold on a moment, this type of movement takes time.
Movements take a while, education takes time. People do have a hard time saying, I want to live in a different state, even though they physically live in the same house. Mm-hmm. It's hard for them, since their lives have been Coloradoans their whole lives, to say that I'm going to be a new Coloradoan or I want to live in the state of liberty or something different.
That desire for something different can also be felt in states like Arizona, Michigan, and in Western Maryland, where thousands have signed secession petitions. One website reads, quote, "We intend to exercise our right of self-determination and self-governance to better secure our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
If they're not going to listen or take our needs into consideration and govern in a way that's more in accordance with how we wish to be governed, we are seeking an amicable divorce.
In Northern California and Southern Oregon, activists want to come together in the state of Jefferson. Their proposed state flag includes two X's, representing their feeling of being double-crossed by the state capitals of Sacramento and Salem.
We need signatures. We need boots on the ground of people that want to go out into your neighborhoods, your churches, your jobs, wherever you're at, and explain this to people and get signatures of support.
Creating a new state isn't easy. As a matter of fact, the last time a state actually gave up territory was in 1820 when Maine split from Massachusetts. Since then, additional efforts have been unsuccessful. The first step is getting it passed by the state legislature and then on to the U.S. Congress.
This is a valid constitutional process that our founding fathers specifically wrote in the Constitution. Well, if they didn't write it into the Constitution to be used, then why did they write it in?
But supporters have an uphill battle. The media will not be their friend.
The danger is that once the outside media starts to grab hold of it, the attention is on the difficulty, the almost impossibility of it happening.
State secession proponents will keep fighting because they say the dismissive attitude of state legislative bodies must end.
I find the sort of arrogant dismissive to be further proof as to just how disconnected the urban is from the rural.
Movements like this in Colorado and other states could be just the beginning.
This isn't a Weld County problem. This is a national problem.
It's called voter discontent, where the people say they've had enough and they're crying out for something to be done.
We at some point have to figure out a way to get our point across, or at least to be able to have a dialogue and not be ignored. Because if you haven't seen anything yet over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think ultimately what people want, whether you look at it from a right or left paradigm, is people want government to stay out of their business.
David Brody, CBN News, in Greeley, Colorado.
There seems to be a growing discontent with Washington. And
that at least gives people something to do with the frustration, because you feel sort of helpless against the government.
Yeah.
At least they're trying something.
Yeah, definitely.
Good to
We'll see how it works.
Stay with us. We are coming right back. 3 children are safe today after being rescued from a minivan their mother drove into the Atlantic Ocean.
That's right. It happened Tuesday in Daytona Beach, Florida. A tourist captured the dramatic scene on video. Police say the pregnant mother, 31-year-old Ebony Wilkerson, drove her van onto the beach and into the ocean. Trapped inside were her 3 children, ages 10, 9, and a 3-year-old, strapped in a car seat. The children could be heard screaming for help. Watch as lifeguards and bystanders rush into the action. The surf is so strong it threatens to pull them all out into the water. They help pull the mother and children out of the van.
By the time I ran over, I get there, I noticed the son was snatching at the wheel, trying to get her to come back towards the shore.
And there's one kid in the back seat just screaming, you know, help us, our mom's trying to kill us.
Earlier in the day, police had stopped Wilkerson in her car. Her sister had called 911, worried about her mental health. But officials say she appeared lucid and let her go. Today, she's undergoing a mental evaluation. And the children are in state custody. What a horrible, horrible story.
Prayers for that woman and those children.
That's it for CBN News Today.
See you tomorrow.